Hello, hi. This is Nishant Malhotra from the Middle Road. I'm also the author of the book Global Development Impact. So I hope you like this video. This is going to be something on carbon pricing, which is based on my book. I hope you like the video. So just like it and subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you want to know a bit about my book, you can always log into www.globaldevelopmentimpact.com. So there are links and you can purchase the book also. The middleroad.org. Now, this is the site of my startup web page. You have a lot of material, including free online courses. This is something which I've already discussed a bit about the books. You can read about it. It's written like a narrative, but it's a very in-depth book on social finance and ESG, including real-life case studies and quizzes, which bridge theory with practice. I'm looking at opportunities to speak, guest lectures, and also designing a module, including a course, elective, you can say, on sustainable investing, ESG, and social finance. So this is a bit about me. You can always reach out to me through the email ID, WhatsApp, or give me a call. Today, I'm going to be talking about an introduction to carbon pricing. This is based on the carbon pricing chapter in my book. This is not a very detailed presentation. This is going to be a very brief and concise presentation, but I hope it clears a lot of concepts related to carbon pricing. So when we talk about carbon pricing, what do we mean? So carbon pricing, when we talk about carbon emissions specifically, they are negative externalities. Now, there is a topic under microeconomics online module, online course. There is a couple of, I think there's one module on externalities. So you can, refer to the middle road and you can know a bit more about negative and positive externalities. Carbon emissions are negative externalities, which basically a social cost. Whenever I talk about it, the social cost exceeds exceeds social benefit. That's what negative externalities means, and that's why one of the reasons why you tax negative externalities. Now, this is the concept of pay as you pollute, which is basically the driving principle behind carbon pricing globally. Now, this is rooted in the welfare economist author Cecil Pigo, who was the first to propose taxing negative externalities. I think you should read a bit about him. So, when you talk about pay as you pollute, we basically talk about social cost of carbon. So, basically, when you talk about pay as you pollute, carbon pricing is known as social cost of carbon, and it's measured as a metric ton of carbon dioxide equivalent. Now, there could be other greenhouse gases which are equated, which I've not talked about. So this is why we talk about the equivalent factor here. Now, when you talk about economic damage, the whole idea is you are polluting and need to pay for it. It's a negative externality. So how you define economic damage? That is basically the damage that is caused by adding 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide equivalent. Now, this gives you a very good defining idea. Now, there was a high level commission. This is based on a research paper, and this gives you a brief idea of what to expect, what sort of carbon prices to expect by certain years. This is what I got from the dashboard. You can refer to it's freely available. It's in World Bank. So this gives you a brief idea of carbon pricing instruments around the world. This is a bit dated data. It's in 2023. How did this idea convert? So we talked about, so my book, of course, covers Kyoto Protocol. The Kyoto Protocol was the first nudge in terms towards carbon trading mechanisms. So there are two of them. This basically international emissions trading and project-driven mechanisms. Now, Kyoto Protocol preceded the Paris Agreement, and we look at Article 6. When we talk about Article 6 Paris Agreement, which replaced the Kyoto Protocol, under Article 6, which is very important of the Paris Agreement, the carbon credits are traded internationally to help countries meet their NDCs. Now, this is a very important concept which you'll keep reading in research reports also. It means nationally determined contributions. Though Paris Agreement is a binding process, these NDCs are voluntary targets, so they are not legally binding. So that's why you would have these targets come out, but then it's not legal. It does not. A country is not binded by these NDCs. So every 5 years, countries are legally required to submit new and more ambitious NDCs, climate plans. So it's more strategic in nature. It's more long term in terms, and the whole idea is to keep the average global temperature to well below 2 degrees centigrades above pre-industrial levels. Although the idea is to limit to 1.5 degrees, but I think this is something which is not tenable at this point in time, and more reasonable it is to expect, even if we are going to, able to limit the temperature below 2 degrees centigrade, that's going to be excellent. So we come to three main forms of carbon pricing. I'm not going to cover these in detail, but I think it's very important that you know what emissions trading system is. This is generated in EU. So this is the most widely used market-based cap and trade, and we're going to be talking about this. Then there's carbon tax, which the governments can directly tax on greenhouse gas emissions. Finally, it is carbon crediting mechanism. They're both voluntary and compliance-based credit trading. I'm not going to be discussing in depth anything about it. When you talk about ETS, which I talked about, emissions trading system, the genesis was in Europe, although China remains the largest among the global coverage. Now, ETS is expanding to Brazil, India, Turkey, and other countries. When we talk about EU emissions trading system, it was launched in 2005. The EU ETS is the world's most mature carbon market. It's not the largest as of now, but it's the most mature and sophisticated carbon market. It covers 27 member countries. This is a bit dated data. I'm sure in terms of the power stations and manufacturing units, it's increased, but it covers around 11,000 power stations and manufacturing units. The coverage is about 38% of the total EU greenhouse gas emissions. Now, since 2013, the allowances were allocated through auctions. So free allowances are being phased out. And the best part is the revenues fund clean tech. And this is one of the major pushers of clean tech in Europe. It's through the innovation and modernization funds. So this is being used, whatever revenues you are getting through carbon pricing, you are actually encouraging or enhancing clean tech. Now, the second largest ETS globally is EU. China is, of course, overtaken in scale, but like I said, EU leads in regulatory sophistication. What I feel is that this is like sort of consensus I feel among the states needs a more significantly larger role. That's where things could be improved on. When we talk about a worldwide emissions trading system as of April 2024, and this is the latest data according to World Bank 2025, there are 80 carbon taxes and ETS schemes operating worldwide. Now that covers around 28% of the global carbon emissions. If you look at the pricing, which is about $104 billion. This is not the most current figures, but you get a fair bit of an idea about how much are the carbon pricing revenues. Now, when we talk about emissions trading system, what are we talking about? So like I talked about, it's a cap. There's a cap which sort of you put up a limit. A cap is set on the total allowable emissions, which are actually reduced progressively over a period of time. So companies can buy and sell, like you trade in stocks. Here, what you do is it's a similar to stock market trading, but here you're trading on carbon allowances. Now, when we talk about carbon allowances, each allowance actually gives you a right to emit 1 ton of carbon dioxide equivalent. Now, ETS accounts for about 70% of global carbon pricing revenues. You could, I'm sure this is, more accurate picture. There's roughly around, I would say around 70%. Now, there's some concept of CORSIA, which is Carbon Offsetting and Reduction Scheme for International Aviation. So this is a mandatory global scheme for the aviation sector. Now, airlines must offset emissions above 2020 baseline levels by purchasing carbon credits. Now, let's say if you look at this graph with the baseline actual emissions, if a company has been able to reduce the emissions, it can always offset of it can always sell the credits, and another company could buy the credit. So this is how the cap and trade works, which I was also talking about. A company could sell and buying, which happens. So credits are generated through climate mitigation activities, which is clean tech, afforestation, biodiversity conservation. Biodiversity conservation was also, I had a podcast with Alfredo Quato. You can check out the middle road and you can check out the podcast section. Six of the Paris Agreement, which is voluntary carbon markets and compliance markets. I'm not going to be talking much about it. Just to give you a picture on total compliance emissions in percentage, how they have increased over a period. Now, again, the data I've taken from World Bank. Now, this is based on the same graph as in the book. The most important factor would be challenges. So, what do you think could be the challenges? Of course, one is fossil fuel subsidies. Now, fossil fuel subsidies in whichever ways. Now, I'm not just quoting IMF estimates here. They reached about $5.9 trillion in 2020, which is 6.8% of GDP, which rises to about 7.4% of GDP by 2025. Now, this is a very excellent example. This directly undermines progress from carbon pricing mechanisms. So you can understand the amount of fossil fuel subsidies that there. This is so huge that whatever revenues you're actually getting for carbon pricing is a very small fraction of this figure. So if you look at the global market, also there's a lack of unified global policy on carbon pricing. But what can we take as the positives? One is, of course, China has now emerged as the largest by coverage. Other regions are also implementing ETS. Let's look at European Union. Now, this was the first region to or bloc to implement ETS. They were committed to being carbon neutral by 2050, which I think they will be able to achieve. And I mean, this is just my personal statement. I don't know how it's going on their various reports, but I feel that they should be able to be carbon neutral by 2050. And they're actually aiming a 55% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from 1990 levels by 2030. So this is excellent. So they have taken the baseline year as 1990. If you look at China, it's also got an ambitious plan. They want to be carbon neutral by 2060 and reduce carbon intensity by 60% from the baseline year is 2005, and of course they want to achieve it by 2030. So there are long-term plans, and countries or blocks or various countries are actually working towards it. That's very good that there's actually a long-term plan to focus on reducing carbon emissions. What's very interesting is a report by Institute of Climate Economics, which says that over half of the carbon revenues, of course, in selected jurisdictions, were allocated to climate and nature-based 22. What's very interesting is this is a cycle. When you raise the revenues from pay as you pollute, you tax carbon emissions, and then you use those proceeds to enhance clean tech or other projects which are going to be positive for the green economy, or you can say positive for the climate. So this is an excellent way of raising revenues for projects which are going to mitigate, not only mitigate but also help in adaptation towards climate action. So one of the key policies, what do you say? So for ETS to achieve true global dominance, the United States needs a significantly larger role. Of course, California has its own cap and trade, but United States, that's where a lot of innovation which has begun, has to, be more focused and has to make this as one of the major goals as it has to go ahead. You could read a lot about carbon pricing. It's not covered in depth. I have covered most of the part which was covered in the chapter, which is related to carbon pricing. And of course, carbon pricing is just one of the chapters. It's a smaller chapter, whereas the book is more dedicated to other instruments of social finance and ESG. Like I've already talked about structured finance. Then there are complex structured products, there are impact bonds, there are sustainable bonds, there are various. So I think it's a very excellent read. It's available on Amazon, Flipkart, Barnes& Noble, and so many other places. As a matter of fact, in Notion Press, there's for a limited period of time free delivery. So I suggest that you buy the book. I think it's an excellent book, an excellent read on this particular topic, on not on topic on carbon pricing, but on the topic of social finance and ESG. So these are some of the references which I also took in the book and have mentioned here. So I hope you like the presentation, like the bit about carbon pricing. The whole job of this particular presentation is to let you know, just give you a brief idea about carbon pricing and what's covered in the book so that you can have now a much better idea of if, let's say, you did not have any understanding of what ETS is, with cap and trade, and how things work within the carbon pricing mechanism. Now you have a fair bit of an idea how world is tackling carbon emissions, how they want to reduce carbon emissions, and carbon pricing instruments are one of them. So I thank you. This is Nishant Malhotra. You subscribe to my YouTube channel, you like the video, and you can always reach out to me. You have my email ID and mobile number. I thank you, and I'll see you around. Do buy the book. I love this. Got a very positive feedback. I loved it from. It's come from across different actors, and I would appreciate your feedback on the book. And see you around. Thank you.